Greetings from Tokyo. This is Daisuke Beppu, and I hope you are all having a really wonderful day today. Continuing with my discussion of the films in the Criterion collection, today I'd like to talk to you about the second film in the so-called Samurai Trilogy. This is spine number 15, and this is a good one. Duel at ICHIJOJI Temple. 1955, Duel at Ichijoji Temple, directed by Hiroshi Inagaki. And this is spine number 15. This is a film that stars Toshiro Mifune in the role of Musashi Miyamoto. And this is an action-packed melodrama samurai film. It is so entertaining, and this is the second film in the Samurai Trilogy. So I have discussed the Blu-ray release of the Samurai Trilogy by the Criterion Collection in the previous video, where I talked about the first film in the Samurai Trilogy, which is Musashi Miyamoto. So if you want to look at that first, by all means, I encourage you to do so. But now I'd like to talk about the second film, which is Duel at Ichijoji Temple. So if you have not yet seen the film, I encourage you to stop this video and watch the film. Please do so, because it is a real entertaining film. I guarantee you'll enjoy it. And when you've finished, please come back and you can watch this video, and I'd be very happy to discuss this film with you. This is a really great one, and I don't want you to be spoiled by anything that I would have to say. So with that in mind, if you haven't seen it, please stop this video and you can come back at any time, and I'd be very happy to talk to you about this wonderful film. Everything that we have seen set up in the first film, Musashi Miyamoto, is now becoming more developed, and the stakes are higher, and really all the characters seem to be diverging at once and then converging and then meeting in a way that is so dramatic and melodramatic and just such a wonderful cinematic experience. Heightened reality. This is not a real film, or a film that's based on realism, no, but this is a real heightened human melodrama that is filled to the brim with great action set pieces. But amongst that, of course, we have the introduction and the great the great presence of the character Kojiro Sasaki, played by Koji Tsuruta, the great famous actor. And here he is so young, and he's got great screen presence, and he is so cool, and he is so calm, and yet he is so smart and intelligent, and you know that there is an edge to his character. There is a certain level of danger to his character when we see him, because you know that he is incredibly skilled. And knowing the legend of Musashi Miyamoto, you know that this is going to be setting up one of the great, well, I won't say anything more, just to say that Kojiro Sasaki is a wonderful presence here, and the acting by Koji Tsuruta is just top-notch. It's a perfect counterbalance, of course, to that great performance by Toshiro Mifune as Miyamoto. Now, compared to the earlier film, now he seems, Musashi as a character seems a bit more stoic, But he is still very strong. He is still displaying great skill as a samurai. Perhaps he is too strong. Perhaps he is displaying too much flashes of violence and swordsmanship, because we see in his early interactions, we see that his swordsmanship results in death, and we see the seeds of the lesson that hopefully that he will learn, or he will try to learn throughout the course of this film, namely that the show of strength is not necessarily the way, the true way of the samurai, at least in the case of Miyamoto. And the fact that he can strike down an opponent does not necessarily mean that he has reached a kind of sense of tranquility or peace or inner peace, or he has reached, obtained the true way of the samurai. And this is a very difficult lesson for Miyamoto throughout this film, because, as you know, he is basically being challenged by different groups and different parts of the narrative. So we've got, of course, the main thrust of the film is his rivalry with the Yoshioka group, the Yoshioka school, led by Seijiro, who is played by Akihiko Hirata, the famous actor. Many people will probably know him from the film Godzilla, but here he plays a very he plays a very sympathetic antagonist to Miyamoto. He is sympathetic because we understand that he loves, or he has an affection for, he really loves Akemi, but Akemi, of course, as we know from the earlier film, loves only one man, her Takezo, of course. And thus it forms a wonderful melodramatic love spiral, as it were. You know, all these men love Akemi, but Akemi loves only one man, Takezo. But Takezo doesn't love Akemi, but Takezo's heart seems to be with Otsu. But when he meets her, he seems not to be interested in her romantically, but he seems to want to pursue the way of the sword, and thus begins the thrust of the film in terms of his rivalry with the Yoshioka group, and in terms of his entanglements with the great Kojiro Sasaki. And all this lovely human drama enmeshes with this really kind of almost complicated plot involving Marahachi coming back, and Otsu wanting to become a nun because she seems to be lost, and there's this confusion because there might be Akemi loves Miyamoto, and Otsu comes just at the right time to see the two of them together, so there's some misunderstanding and kind of mistakes and mistaken identity, and all this crazy stuff comes together. You know, Matahachi pretending to be Kojiro Sasaki and all this stuff. So it has the whimsy and the great wonderful confusion of a Shakespeare play. And granted, I think the plot can be very, as I said, it feels like a serial, and thus it feels very episodic. There are many different strains going on here. You've got, of course, Miyamoto Musashi's storyline. You've got the idea of Otsu, and you've got Akemi, and you've got Kojiro Sasaki, and you've got Seijiro, and you've got Matahachi and his little story, and all these little strands coming together. You'd think that in a film that's filled with all these subplots, you'd think that sometimes a film of this magnitude might tend to focus on one subplot over another, thus ignoring ignoring other subplots, and thus feeling imbalanced. Well, here we don't get that sense of imbalance. I think here we get a real balanced look at all of these subplots, and they naturally come together. Well, I should say this, they feel on the one hand to come together naturally, but on the other hand there is a real sense of melodrama. Akemi and Musashi Miyamoto seem to come together just at the point that Otsu just happens to be in the distance, and just at the right moment she just happens to look at them, embrace. That sort of wonderful coincidence that can exist only in melodrama. Although it is a very, admittedly, kind of a complex plot, and perhaps sometimes a bit of a confusing plot, it still has, as I say, a very serialized approach. So I think it feels easily understood in segments or chunks. So therefore, I think it is very easy to follow. It's only later when you think back on the film and you try to explain to someone what it was about, I think it becomes a little bit of a challenge. But I think that's one of the great things about the film, is that it's so easy to follow as you're watching it, and it has a really nice through line for each of the characters. Despite, however, the fact that the film is well, it's arguably yet still very complicated, right? At the same time, it doesn't really matter what the plot is, if you know what I mean, because really, this is a setting up of all of these characters that are just larger than life, and they're just coming together in a way that is just... the plot is basically, in a sense, an excuse for us to see these characters collide. These characters colliding on screen. There comes a point where it almost doesn't matter what the plot is. You're just so focused on these characters and how they are going to collide. What forces and what circumstances are going to come about that will bring these forces of nature together. And my goodness, it is just absolutely amazing. I should say a couple things here. First is the music. The music is, again, you've got that great theme. The Ikuma Dan music is really memorable. It has that driving theme that is so heroic. So it's such an iconic musical theme. And it's just wonderful to see that continue from the first film to this film. Swordsplay and the fighting here is just unbelievable. You've got different styles of fighting here. You've got the first battle when you've got Musashi Miyamoto fighting Baiken, and you've got that Baiken with that chain, and then you've got Musashi Miyamoto with the sword. The swordsmanship and the fighting is very restrained. In other words, it's never superfluous, it's never gratuitous, there's no sense of violence, but it's all shot kind of in mid-shot or maybe from a distance. There is a wonderful battle between Musashi Miyamoto and Denshichiro Yoshioka, and it's a wonderful battle because we see it start, but then we don't see it end. It then cuts to a completely different scene, and then we just see the aftermath, which is Musashi Miyamoto walking back, returning from the battle. And because we see him return, we assume that he has won the battle, and thus his rival in the battle has fallen. We see the setup and we see the beginnings of the battle, but we don't see the ending, which is quite a brave choice if you think about it in terms of an action film, because it cuts away from the very point that we want to see the battle. We don't get the satisfaction of seeing the climax of the battle, but in a sense it doesn't really matter. And to me, that edit is the essence of the lesson that Musashi Miyamoto must learn in this film, right? Namely that it is not the point that he succeeds in the form of a gratuitous, violent swing of the sword, and it's not the point that we see it, but rather there's something grander at play. In other words, there seems to be something that we must learn, as Miyamoto Musashi must learn. You know, it's not about the actual climax of the battle and the thrill of the battle, but there's something higher and there's something more grand that we must learn with Musashi. So that's, I think, a wonderful parallel between us and the character of Musashi Miyamoto. And I should also mention, I didn't mention this before, but the character of Akemi, who's played by the brilliant, famous Japanese actor whose name is Mariko Okada. This is one of the great performances, and we really see the character of Akemi beginning to blossom into her own. She is the she is such a tragic character in many ways. You know, she is thrust into these really terrible situations, and really she is trying to do her best, but she is thrust into these terrible situations, and she is trying to help her love, Takezo, but she is being rejected by him because Takezo loves something else or someone else. And so she is becoming a real tragic figure, and she is tied also, inextricably linked with Kojiro Sasaki. She is like that both, I think, metaphorically and also within the same physical space, at least at the end. So it's a really wonderful character of Akemi, played with such brilliance by Mariko Okada, who's a very famous Japanese actor, and you know, I'm sure people will recognize her from other films, by Yasujiro Ozu, for example. She also makes a very memorable appearance in the film Tampopo. But Akemi is a great character, and that's one to watch as we continue on through this film and to the final film, the third film in the Samurai trilogy. And of course, the other character to watch, I think, is such a charismatic character, Kojiro Sasaki. He is set up here, and he becomes a kind of he's not necessarily a rival to Miyamoto yet. He seems to be an ally of sorts, but we know that that will change in a very dramatic fashion in the third film. But it's really nice to see the interplay here. I have to say something about the end, because the film is called Duel at ICHIJOJI Temple, and that end battle is just fantastic. One of the great, most exciting end battles. And what I love about it is it is in the mud, and it's in nature, and it's outside, and you've got mud sort of standing in for blood, so you never see any actual bloody violence, but it's all implied, and it is all done with a grace of movement, which is fantastic. Also, we see Musashi Miyamoto adapting to his environment and his surroundings. He uses the environment that is available to him, so this muddy rice paddy and a sliver of land separating the paddies. So he's trying to use the environment to his advantage, because he is one against many, and so it is his only hope in order to make it out alive. It's his only hope to try to take advantage of the situation that is made available to him. So this is a wonderful example of using the environment and adapting oneself to one's surroundings, and this will come into play in a very crucial way in the third film, as we shall see. But for the time being, I think it's a real wonderful example of the kind of strategy that's going on. And that's just an example of the great swordsmanship in this film. All of the battles don't rely on just brute force, but there's a real thought process that's going on. Each battle has some kind of strategy that's being employed. We also see Kojiro Sasaki fight, and when we see him fight, we realize that he is not only an expert swordsman, but he is also a very intelligent swordsman, which makes for a very dangerous combination indeed. So I love how there is thought and precision and strategy that is so obviously at play when we see the battle scenes kind of develop before our very eyes. You know, Musashi Miyamoto, man, it's like all the women love him, you know. It's, you know, everyone falls in love with him, but that one woman that he, you know, maybe he loves, Otsu, they try to get together at the end, and you've got that beautiful scene by the brook, the river, and the water, and he tries to seduce her, but he fails for whatever reason. You know, she rejects his advances at the time, and thus he, as a character, you know, rejects the company of women, and thus this sets him firmly on his path towards being a great swordsman, the way of the sword, the way of the samurai, the way towards enlightenment. And thus the end is him walking down the path, which is the great image. Musashi Miyamoto walking down the path towards some goal, walking down the path of life. This is the ultimate image, and what a way to end the film. My goodness, if this doesn't make you want to see what happens next, I mean, I don't know what else to say. Wonderful film. Duel at Ichijoji Temple is one of the most exciting, exhilarating, thrilling samurai action films, samurai melodrama films, and just films in general that you'll ever see, I think. So I highly recommend that you watch Duel at Ichijoji Temple if you haven't already. Next time, of course, I will be talking about the third film in the trilogy, which is Duel at Ganryu Island, which is the third and last film in this wonderful trilogy called the Samurai Trilogy. So please, won't you join me for that? I would love to see you. In the meantime, my friends, if you have any comments or questions, please let me know down below, and I will do my best to address them. Until we meet again, my friends, please be happy, be healthy, and be well. And please keep on watching a lot of great films. Take care, my friends.